Labour MP Fabian Hamilton is working with his constituent Daphne Frank to clamp down on predatory marriages. Daphne is in the studio with me now, and Fabian will be with us imminently. Welcome, Daphne. Thank you so much for being here. Tell me about when you found out your 91-year-old mum had got married. Who did she get married to? How well did she know him?
She lived next door to us, so that's a really important point. We saw her all the time and every day. We'd have been aware of the threat from this man for several years. We'd been to all the authorities, and either people didn't know what to do or they just didn't perceive the threat. So she died on Easter Saturday, 2016. On Easter Tuesday, when everything opened up again after the Easter holiday, we got a phone call from Mum's GP, and he sounded really worried. And he said, "Daphne, did you know your mother was married?" And it was just horrendous. It was, "I'm so sorry, doctor, I've got to sit down." It was because we had seen it coming. We'd been to everyone and tried to stop it and got nowhere.
What was your mum's state of mind when she got married?
I need to say this really clearly. She had a 5-year history of diagnosed vascular dementia running all through her medical records. She also had terminal cancer. In her medical records, a couple of years before the wedding, it says she can't consent to a cancer treatment because she doesn't remember she's got cancer. That was 2 years before the wedding. So she never knew she was married, and actually she was wearing my dad's wedding ring till the day she died. So we didn't know. The man didn't tell anybody.
So your mum, Joan, she dies, as you say, in March 2016. Of course, it's devastating for anyone to lose their mum, but the nightmare doesn't end there, does it?
It was just starting, actually. It was absolutely just starting. She had made a will in 2004. Because marriage revokes a will, the husband would automatically inherit the first 270,000 of the estate, which in my mum's case was all of it. I had registered power of attorney, but the astonishing is there is no link with marriage. So when the marriage was planned, there was absolutely no requirement to tell me that mum was planning, or the man was planning to marry her. She didn't plan it. She never knew she was married.
And he took over the funeral arrangements.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. It's so distressing.
We took him to court on the advice of a solicitor who said, surely, once it was obvious the marriage was dodgy, they would give the funeral to us. But actually, the judge said, although it was very likely that Mum did not have capacity to marry, hey, she was legally married to him. He was her legal husband. He could have the funeral and we could pay all the costs, which was 200 grand on top of the 200 grand inheritance that we lost. The legal fees were and it. As a result of that, the man had a secret funeral after the secret marriage. We couldn't go, we didn't know when it was. We tracked her grave down. It's in a town near Leeds, with which Mum had no connection. The grave is unmarked. He remarried in 2018.
I want to bring in your MP, Fabian Hamilton, who you've been working together on this. I mean, Fabian, how can this happen? How can this be legal?
Well, sadly, it is legal. And when Daphne came to see me at my advice surgery in 2017, it must have been, I was so shocked because I didn't think it was legal either. But it's perfectly legal. And what that told me was that the law needed changing, and needed changing fast. Now, the more we delved into this, the more we realised that actually this was happening not in vast numbers, but all over the country. All over England and Wales, there were people whose elderly parents, male or female, mum or dad, were getting married by somebody who seemingly wanted to look after them, was maybe 15, 20, 30 years younger, seemed very plausible at the time. But if you've got dementia or you're at the edge of dementia, this can seem really great, but you don't know what the motivation is. And most people, and I've done a little survey on my way here, actually, very unscientific, most people in the public have no idea, including members of Parliament, that if you remarry having made a will, that will is then null and void on remarriage. And that is the key here. That is the motivation. And that's what we've got to get changed, Daphne, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how can you change it, Fabian? What steps can you take in Parliament
Well, I introduced a 10-minute rule bill in 2017, November 2017. That's just a paper face of the bill with the title on it. It has no substance because you never get any further than the first reading, effectively. But it had all-party support.
Right, that's good.
So the most important thing is this is not controversial politically. It may be within the Law Commission. They may have all sorts of reasons why they don't want this change to take place. But it's not controversial as far as the parties are concerned. So I then asked the Prime Minister a question about this in 2020, I think it was. Or no, 2021. So it was just a year ago.
Yeah.
He promised to put me in touch with the Justice Minister, Lord Wolfson, who was very, very pleasant and helpful and really concerned. We had a meeting in July of last year. He promised to do something about it, but he had to wait for the Law Commission. In the meantime, Daphne went to a very, very well-qualified solicitor, not sure we're allowed to mention names, but who knew his stuff on probate and wills, who wrote a proposal for the Law Commission, which Daphne and this gentleman, this solicitor, myself and a few others presented to the Justice Ministry in December, just before Christmas last year. And then I had a response from the Justice Minister, can't remember who it was now, Tom Pursglove, on Zoom, who was very helpful, actually, but again said that we need to wait for the Law Commission. These things are so bureaucratic. And my argument is that while you're prevaricating, there are people all over the country, not in vast numbers, who are suffering. The whole families are suffering the way Daphne, her husband and her brother suffered as a result of what happened to Joan. And we must stop this. It's very simple. We change the wills legislation, we beef up the training for registrars, and we allow the marriage bans to be published in advance over the internet, not just on the door of the registry office.
Absolutely, yeah.
I just can't believe, nobody helped you. Like the police, or was anybody your ally in any of this?
Nobody knew what to do. We went to the police before Mum died, and unfortunately we hit on a very old-fashioned policeman who just said, oh, people will say you just don't like him. And that was hopeless. Afterwards, they were really helpful. They built a case, they put it to the Crown Prosecution Service, where it failed because no evidence is kept at marriage. If you ring your bank, your call's recorded. If you get married, there's nothing, no record of what happened on that day, apart from the certificate. We know because the registrars wrote she couldn't answer some of the questions, but the man had told them she was forgetful. So they just didn't ask any further because they're not trained in dementia or safeguarding.
Daphne, you are very robust. You're obviously incredibly strong. You've been to hell and back.
Absolutely, to hell and back. And actually, I have spoken to many other cases who have also been to absolute hell and back because we set up a website. We started hearing from other cases.
Tell us about that website, just in case anybody watching needs
predatorymarriage.uk. And we set the website up, we started hearing from other cases, and then we went to Fabian, who was the first person who really, really listened. And then he looked shocked and said, I'm going to raise this in Parliament. And then he did. And as Fabian just said, it's a totally straightforward cross-party safeguarding issue. I'm very pleased to say that the Forced Marriage Unit are now beginning to roll out some training to registrars. I don't blame the registrars. I don't actually blame anyone, because registrars are low-paid clerical officials who are not trained in mental capacity. How can they be expected to assess whether somebody's fit to marry within a few minutes of meeting them? It's nonsense. It's a leftover from the 19th century. It needs to be changed.
And your mum or your case, it's not isolated.
No,
referred to that. So you come across, you now work with other people who have been...
Lots of us. Some of them have become really, really good friends. The predators always seem to do the exact opposite of what the family wants. So one family want their loved one to be buried in Holland, and the predator had them cremated in England. I don't know what it is. I think because, although the money is one thing, to me, the main sort of what's behind it all is control. Yeah. That's what it's about. It's all about control.
Because I just can't understand why, as you say, the money is one thing, but why deny the family the chance to be at the funeral?
Because these people don't think like you and me. It's all about coercive control. It's about It's as much about... They all keep the money, don't get me wrong, but it's as much about wanting to have control of the person and the funeral and everything, and to score points against the family for some bizarre reason.
Fabian, you're not going to give up on changing the law on this. Are you hopeful that, you've said that you've had good meetings with government ministers, so that the will is there, but you've just got to push them?
Yes, I think we can't give up on this, and we need to keep pushing, because inevitably with government, as in many other walks of life, unless you're there up front pushing, constantly prodding and poking, it goes to the back of the queue, it goes onto the back burner. We can't allow this to happen. As I said earlier, it's not a vast number of people, but the distress, the grief, as Daphne has illustrated, is echoed many-fold across the country, and we just can't let this continue when it's so unnecessary.
You cannot get over not being able to go to your mother's funeral. It's just something you can't. It's always there. It's always there. I'm very pleased to say that the General Register Office, who are in charge of the registrars, are now making real progress in catching up and improving the training, which is brilliant. And as I say, it's not down to one bad organisation. It is just down to procedures and laws not having caught up with the 21st century.
Absolutely correct. My sister-in-law is actually a registrar, and she's part-time. And she says that she takes it on herself to assess whether somebody or a couple are capable of entering into the contract. But she's no obligation to do that at all. As Daphne said, they're not well paid.
You've highlighted such a terrible horror that you went through, that you're campaigning to change, and I'm so pleased that you came on the show to tell us.
Well, with allies
they
like
haven't
Daphne.
met. I mean, seriously, they were pretty formidable. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.